Welcome everybody to today's session on Who's Got the Wheel, clarifying roles with the RACI matrix. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Kathleen Moorhead. I'm the owner and founder of Paton Consulting, and I help people and projects move forward. I do these webinars, complimentary webinars on a monthly basis. I also am a hands-on project manager. And I also provide project management and leadership training. And my main goal is to just help people and teams move forward and to reduce some of the chaos that everybody experiences every day. So with that, let's get started and let's just see if this resonates with anybody. So do any of these quotes sound familiar? Have you said them yourself, either out loud or internally? I thought you were doing this. Or wasn't that their job? Or no one told me that was on my plate. Why are they doing that? I already did it. Or I didn't know that was already done. I could have started my part days ago. Right? So we've all been in situations where these things cross our mind or they actually happen. And it's just not enjoyable to be part of and to witness. So what actually happens is what we'd like to call the responsibility drift. And the responsibility drift happens when there's not clear roles and responsibilities defined, and then people are really unsure of what to do. So their responsibility drifts. And what happens is, and I'll just go through these one by one. Tasks are part of the project. They're part of getting the work done, but nobody's really sure who's responsible for them. So they kind of just linger. And then eventually they turn into crisis mode because they're extending over a due date or a deadline because nobody was actually assigned to work on it. Second is everyone assumes that someone else is handling it. So there's finger pointing going on. And as the saying goes, when we assume, we make an ass out of you and me. So I thought Sheila was doing it. Sheila thought John was doing it. John thought Jack was doing it. And at the end of the day, nobody was doing it. And then progress can slow down because decisions stall. So part of what we'll talk about is in the RACI matrix, responsibility and accountability, and about decisions. So if it's clearly identified about who a decision maker is, that's going to make sure that the momentum can stay throughout the project, because that's already going to be defined about who the key decision maker is. No one steps in because no one knows they should, right? So if there's a task and it has not been assigned to you, or there's a work stream and nobody's talked to you about it, you're not going to necessarily just step in and assume responsibility. So then what ends up is that no one steps up because no one knows that they should. Or conversely, there's multiple people working on the same tasks, trying to accomplish the same exact deliverables, and then there's duplicative work that's being done. And dependencies are missed because teams don't know when to act, right? So the quote in the beginning was, if I would have known that that was done, I could have started my piece. I could have started working on my part of the work, but that was a dependency for me to begin. And if I don't know that that dependency was completed, then I don't know that I can start. So overall, what happens is that momentum is lost and everybody starts to get really frustrated. And as a project manager, a lot of it will tend to fall on the project manager because they become the catch-all because there's things that need to get done and there's nobody to do it. So perhaps that's not going to be the case when there's a subject matter expert that's needed for a particular task. But when it's more general, then the project manager might just end up assuming that responsibility. And that is not the intent of being a project manager, nor is it the intent of having a project team. Having a project team, the intent is to get the work done efficiently and effectively. So we say that RACI stops the drift. Okay, because a RACI helps clarify roles. It forces decisions about who's doing what, and it eliminates that overlapping responsibility that can happen. It promotes accountability because it assigns a clear owner and everyone knows exactly what they're responsible for. Communication is enhanced because everybody's much more clear on what their roles are and what they're responsible for. And it creates a reference point. So that saying about getting everybody on the same page, the RACI literally gets everybody on the same page with a go-to document so that when questions arise, it's a very easy reference point to see who is responsible for what, who is supposed to be clarifying or who's supposed to be communicating information, who's supposed to be consulted, and who are the key decision makers. So we can just take this example at a very, very high level and apply it to a personal experience. So planning a family vacation. If you don't have clear roles assigned and you don't know who needs to be consulted and who needs to be informed, you can't have a family vacation where you never talk about who's responsible for booking the airfare and you end up booking two separate flights. Who's responsible for booking the hotel? You end up booking two hotels. You can't plan a family vacation without being communicative about when we land so that the itinerary can pick up and the hotel can be booked based on that date and time. So it's just a thinking model about everybody kind of needs to be kept in the loop, and we need to lay this out in the beginning to prevent chaos going down the road. So the RACI matrix actually stands for, the R is responsible. Okay, so these are the doers who complete the task. They have the hands-on involvement and drive the work to completion. They are the responsible person. The accountable person is the person accountable to make sure that the person who's responsible is actually getting the work done. And if that person is not getting the work done, they're accountable to find somebody else who can be responsible. 9 times out of 10, the person who's going to be accountable is either going to be the project manager or the project sponsor, or sometimes, depending on how granular you go, it may be the supervisor or the leader of the team. So again, accountable is the overarching umbrella person who is accountable to making sure that this particular task is getting completed. They are not the ones doing the work. The person doing the work is the responsible one. The C stands for consultant. These are typically subject matter experts who are consulted before tasks are completed to get the input, to get the best practices, to get the lessons learned so that the task can move forward. And I is informed. So that whole analogy that I used in the beginning about if somebody would have told me that this was done 2 weeks ago, I could have proceeded with my task. That's the informed person. These are the people who need to know that the task is being done and when it is completed. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be either just for information purposes only, or there's an action that is going to be a result of that task being completed. So creating a RACI matrix really could not be easier. And I just have the list here and I'm going to show you an example as well. But essentially you're identifying your project tasks or deliverables, and you're identifying your key stakeholders or roles that are in the project. And you're going to have in one column your tasks, and then across each of the, in each of the rows, you're going to have your tasks, and then in each of the columns, you're going to have your stakeholders. And then you just match up. Here's a task for this stakeholder. What is their role in the project? Okay, so I'm going to just pull this up and I will provide a link to this so that you have access to it as well. So this is an example of a RACI. It is the simplest tool. It's not anything rocket science related, but the creation of it and the review of it can be a game changer for any project or initiative. So as you'll see in column A, these are the tasks. This is a fictitious project, a website redesign project for Randall Distributors. Your project sponsor's name, project manager's name, and then you're just listing the tasks. And for each task, you're saying, okay, Nancy as the project sponsor, what is her role with this task? For this particular task, she's accountable. And this is an automated template, so I have the drop downs here available for you. For me as a project manager, what is my role in this task? Oh, I'm actually responsible for this task. Tanya, she's the technical lead. She needs to be informed about this task, as well as Drew from operations. And then Michaela, she needs to be consulted. So I need to, in order for me to complete this task, to be responsible for it, I need to consult with Michaela to make sure that I am successfully completing this task and thinking of all the variables that need to be considered in that task. So that's, you just go down task by task, and after you've filled this out, now people tend to react to things more so than creating things. So my suggestion is that you create this RACI as a draft document, either with yourself or maybe that you have a colleague that might make sense to do this with, and then you bring it to the team for them to review and make revisions. And what happens is somebody will look, Tanya's going to look, and she's going to say, okay, for this project, here's how I'm going to add value. Here is my role within this project. And she will be able to say, you know what? I don't really need to be informed. Not yet. Like, take me off the informed, because I just need to know the end result. When you guys finalize your business requirements, that's when you're going to come to me. I don't want to be caught up in all of the nuanced conversations about everything. Okay, fine. If that's an agreement that can be made, then that is made. Conversely, Drew might say, I don't want to just be informed. I need to be consulted. I want to be part of this conversation so that when we're meeting with stakeholders, you have some background on what has been happening to date. Okay, fine. Right? So it gets everybody to literally think about themselves and the project in this document that can reflect the project and everybody's role and the value that they're adding in the project. And when there is an issue, it also allows you to come back and say, okay, so Drew, we had you as responsible for creating the user personas and journey maps. I'm not seeing any progress in that area, or I haven't seen an update. Can we talk about this? He might say, well, I'm waiting on Michaela because I'm working with her and she's supposed to be updating me and I haven't received that update, right? So it's just a point of reference so that you could go back and that there's less confusion about who's doing what and when they're doing it. So this is an example. I'll send you the link to this as well. Here is an actual blank template so that you can fill that out yourself. And then I have the terminology here so that you can remember who's doing what. And then there's just some tips here. So typically, for a person, if you don't have any empty spaces, so there's no dashes or NAs, that might mean that there's too much work on your plate. If somebody has too many A's, that might mean that they're not delegating and that they have too much authority. If there's too many R's, it might mean that they have too much work, not delegating. This is a note. One person can be accountable and responsible for a task, and actually that does happen quite frequently, especially for a project sponsor, a project manager, a technical lead, somebody who's playing a significant role in the project. They might actually be accountable and responsible. Some other tips: too many R's mean that there might be too many people getting involved to get the work done. Too many C's, too many people being consulted, and that might actually slow work down. Too many I's, might be that, you're over communicating, which I know is an oxymoron, but sometimes you just need to set the stage that this is the plan, and I will communicate if something deviates from that plan, because everybody's saturated with emails and communication. So maybe the precedents might need to be set that you'll be informed of certain criteria, and then only if something deviates. And there really shouldn't be any blank spaces. Every task should have an R and A. And if you don't have C's and I's, it means you might have missed some stakeholders. Not 100%, but that is something that you can look for that could be telling. So I'm going to go back here, and like I said, I will share that document with you in the chat. So as I alluded to, that when everybody sees their name on this RACI matrix, it becomes a promise. It's almost like, okay, we've reviewed this collectively. We've all agreed that this is the way the project is going to go. And it's so much different than reading a project charter or reading a scope of work or reading the success criteria, right? Because those are words on a page. Yes, they have meaning. But when somebody sees their name associated with something related to the project, it just automatically creates personal accountability. And they will be more likely to say, I have another big project I'm working on. I can't commit to this. Or the time period that this project is going to go through, I'm on vacation 3 of those weeks, whatever it may be, but they're putting their name and everybody else is seeing it, and it's like this light bulb goes off for people. It is actually very, very life-changing as far as a project is concerned. So typically a RACI matrix is used in waterfall. And waterfall means that there is a very planned process for a project. And you can just picture the waterfall. You do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this. In agile project management, there's some structure, but agile works a lot on iterative approaches and iterative development. That is not to say that a RACI can't be used in agile. It's actually very beneficial to use in agile or in a hybrid project management world. So it brings structure to the big picture of the project, right? So when you're thinking about using a RACI in an agile project environment, it's the focus is not on each individual task, but it's on the major key areas of the project. So for example, communication to stakeholders. Who's responsible for the communication to stakeholders in an agile project, right? Let's discuss that and define that up front. Who's responsible for providing status reports to executive management? Who has to be consulted on those status reports? Who are those status reports going to? So it's the bigger picture around an agile project. So it's not the how, but the what that would be focused on in an agile environment. And again, extremely helpful. And in both waterfall and agile projects, people come and go, right? That's life. That's going to happen in any work environment. So having this RACI in place allows onboarding to more easily happen, because you're going to say, okay, Joe, you're the quality control manager. Here's your role in the project. Here's what you're responsible for. Here's what you're accountable for. Here's where you're going to be consulted. Here's where you're going to be communicated with. And it allows for that transition to happen a little more seamlessly. I'm also going to mention at this point that the acronym RACI, is one of maybe 15 or 20 different acronyms that are out there. So the terminology that you use, responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, is just one of many options that are out there. There's other acronyms, and it doesn't even have to obviously spell something, but use the terminology that works for you and your team. So maybe it's the decision maker. So there's going to be a D there, right? Maybe it's collaborate. So maybe it's a CL for collaborate. It's the concept of having this type of document and adding this structure to your project that is the valuable takeaway here. So some additional takeaways for a RACI in general is that this is meant to clarify, not to add complexity. So you have to weigh the project, your organization's maturity level with respect to project management to know about how granular you want your RACI to go. So it's very similar to doing a work breakdown schedule, for example. For a 2-year project, you're probably not going to list, every task that takes 2 hours to complete. But if you have a 2-week project, you might want to be a little bit more granular in it. So the RACI should be comparative in nature, right? It should be, if you're dealing on a big project, or as I use the Agile example, maybe you're just using the RACI for some really key milestones and deliverables, and you're not diving in deep to every individual task. For other projects, based on the scope and the complexity, yeah, you might want to dive a little bit deeper and do it, but do it for what works for you. Again, it's not meant to like complicate things. It's meant to clarify things. And I have simple but powerful here because it is so simplistic, but extremely powerful and can be, sometimes it's a matter of changing the dance within organizations, especially if there's issues with accountability and people not necessarily knowing who's doing what. This can be very helpful. I just worked with an organization not related to project management at all, just with an operational company. And we sat down and listed the day-to-day tasks of what everybody in the office does, to realize that there was 3 people doing the same exact task and interacting with customers, which was causing confusion. So we just went through, listed all of the tasks that had to be done on a daily basis, listed all of the employees and their roles, and decided who was going to be, and theirs was responsible and informed, right? So who was responsible for completing the task? And once that task was completed, who needed to know that that task was completed? Because again, that's usually a trigger for additional work or other items to be done. So the concept of this is applicable not only within project management, but in operations of organizations across the board. And I just have here smoother execution, because when everyone knows their part and projects move forward with less friction and fewer surprises, it just makes things go smoother, and it makes everybody feel better about their participation in the project. At the beginning, I had it, when there's that responsibility drift, it impacts morale, and people end up kind of just throwing their hands up and saying, I don't know what's going on. And I'm not going to be the one that comes in and saves the day. So people tend to step back, they become more reserved. But when things are moving more quickly, you're going to notice that people are more likely to step up and take more ownership. And this is a fabulous tool for accountability without micromanaging. So as project managers, we're in this unique situation where we have a team of people that we are responsible for leading, directing, guiding, making sure they're getting their work done, but we have no authority over them. There's no supervisory relationship at all. So this is a way to, again, and I don't want to say publicly hold people accountable, but it's a way to bring accountability to the project in a very transparent nature, without necessarily micromanaging or getting into the nuances behind the scenes for somebody. Here's what we agreed to. This is the expectation, and you're moving forward that everybody's in agreement with that expectation. So I'm going to wrap us up here just in the interest of time, to make sure you all have time to get back to your day. What I ask is that you follow along on social media. I share some tips and information as well as when these webinars are coming up. You can certainly scan that QR code and that will bring you to a bio site with all of my social media platforms there. And if you want to schedule time to connect, we can walk through what this could look like for your team. More than happy to do that. And if today's session was helpful and you think that your team could benefit, I'd love an introduction to whoever handles project management, team training, or professional development to have that conversation with them. And I'm going to go ahead and in the chat, just send a link to the RACI so that you have that and can access that at your convenience. So with that, I am going to wrap us up for today. If there's any questions, you can certainly put them in the Q&A and I'd be happy to stay on and answer them for you. And I thank you so much for joining me today.